covering all your favorite parts of the 50-yard fight. This is the Inside the Walls podcast with Zach Kyleman and Jim Mernier.
Welcome, fans of the 50-yard fight, and welcome to a new edition of Inside the Walls podcast, Wednesday Rewind. Yes, it's unique. I'm actually introing the show this week, but we will have two more editions of Inside the Walls podcast this week. Alongside me, of course, I can't do it without myself. I am Jim Mernier. Alongside me, 900 miles away, Zach Kyleman.
Hey, how we doing? Rewind, the first edition of one of three separate shows that we are doing now for Inside the Walls. Look, we realized these are some long episodes, people. We could really divvy these things up, and look, there's a lot to talk about just between all this stuff going on. So why not kick things off with the week leading into the season with talking about last week and all the things and bells and whistles and tidbits that you might have missed over the weekend that we might have to hit on from over the weekend. So rewind it is. Let's turn it on back, hit that big old rewind button, and take a spin back on the tape to what was happening over last Saturday and Sunday, shall we?
We should, but I think we might have to talk about the big elephant in a room that happened before last weekend's games.
It just means I got to hit the rewind button a little farther back. That's all it is. It's rewind. Just go a little farther back.
A little further. You got to go past the previews and the...
There we go.
Well, you know, the FBI logo can't record this. You know, you'd be sued. for you younger kids, that's VHS. What happened, basically, it dropped. The news dropped when we dropped our show last week. We are, most of you may know, we record our shows either on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. It's the best chance that me and Zach can get together. This news broke late Wednesday afternoon, early Thursday, of a trade between the Albany Empire and the Jacksonville Sharks, trading quarterbacks, Warren Smith and Mike Faithful. Both quarterbacks have similarities to the other team's rosters. Warren Smith has had plenty of experience playing with Darius Prince up there in Albany, and also Antoine Grant from the Atlantic City Blackjacks back in the AFL. And Faithful won the 2019 NAL championship with the Jacksonville Sharks. So familiarity. There's a lot of questions and a lot of rumors of why the trade happened. Those are still, in my opinion, we still can't get a straight answer. And I'm not going to elaborate on rumors to you. If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to, sugarcoat something that's not, because we don't want to give you guys false information. But we do know that the trade was rescinded on a Friday, right before, of course, the upcoming week's game. And it kind of, blew some feathers around the league to a point where both Warren Smith Jr. and Mike Faithful were not dressed out for the game in Jacksonville Saturday night. This is very rare. Trades happen in every sport, but in the arena game, trades are very rare of this magnitude. Correct. We had a lot of listeners out there and a lot of fans out there wondering, why are you making such a big deal of Warren Smith and Mike Faithful? Well, these are two prominent arena football quarterbacks. Basically, you can say you can relate to the National Football League. It's like the Patriots and the Colts trading Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in their prime. That'll be a seismic shift in the league. But it didn't go through. There's a lot of rumors about what happened, what situations happened, but we just don't know. We know that if it did happen, me and Zach would have been here live Thursday or Friday when it was official with a live podcast telling you how magnitude this was. But it didn't. Resend it. A lot of questions still out there. So you listeners out there, you know as much as we do, because both organizations, the Sharks and the Albany Empire and the NAL, have kept this pretty sealed. And again, not going to tell a lot from information that I don't have. I'm not going to be that individual.
Well, these are the facts as I understand them. You have two teams that played each other last week, supposedly looking to do a trade. Mm-hmm. It's rescinded. I don't know about you, but connect the dots to me, and that makes me seem like, hey, if I trade my star guy, my starting caliber quarterback who led week one for the Empire, someone who's very familiar with Coach Burley's offense, mind you, someone who won a championship under said coach, someone who could step in and to have his number one receiver back in his pocket once again. I don't know about you, but that screams to me, I don't want to give the opposition a competitive advantage going in, because in arena there's one thing I've learned talking to QBs, and you've heard this too. If you've been in some systems, you can kind of pick it up pretty quickly. It's not a lot of packages in arena are pretty similar. Not all of them. I'm not going to say that it's all the same across every team, but it's pretty similar. And especially with Mike Faithful step into a system that he already knows, it wouldn't take that long to just jump in and do it, guys. I mean, Devin Wilson alone, you could throw it up. And then you have, of course, Rod Jones, who himself, as we saw even in this last week's contest, guy can just play all around the place. I mean, that's how I'm reading it. Again, if we want to speculate, that's my speculation. I wouldn't trade the quarterback that would probably rip you apart.
Me either.
The week of of competition. I'm just saying, I would even look at that and go, yeah, can we back off for a few days? Oh, if that's cool with you, look, you got your starting QB still. We'd be down a quarterback, so you still have that edge.
Yeah,
that's how I'd play it off.
Yeah, but
that's how I play it as.
That's a strategy that happens for a lot of teams, and for this situation, Albany. Just imagine Albany, if that trade was official and Faithful was wearing the Shark jersey Saturday night. I'm going to say it. Sharks win that game.
Right. Well, I don't think you see Warren Smith dressing up that night either. That's the thing. That just the trade specifics and what we know with Warren's situation, he's not dressing. It still would have been Sam Castronova out there.
Which, speaking of last week, dude balled out. He won the fan vote for the Inside the Walls Podcast Player of the Week award. We had over 200 people in our polls, both Facebook and on Twitter.
Yep.
Emphasize that. Thank you to the people who went on and vote. Sam Castronova took 46% of the vote, and we've had a couple of listeners reach out and say, is this the first time that a guy won the award without getting the 50% mark? Yeah, this is the second time. The first time was last year between Mason Espinoza and Tommy Grady, where Tommy Grady, I think, won by 1%. It was very close. It was 48 to 47. It was really unique with the other two guys with him. But yes, Sam Castronova has history with the show. Kind of proved us wrong. Me and you both picked Albany to lose to Jacksonville because of the quarterback situation.
Yeah, and we've given him a thorough shredding last year. But credit, I mean, I'll be honest with you, this year to last is kind of night and day. That's not the same Sam Castronova that was with the Carolina Cobras last season. That's a different man with arguably, I mean, they were still good weapons over in Carolina, but the dude is looks like he's adapting to the game more. It looks like,
more fire,
comfortable, scrambling around more. He looked like he had control of what he saw downfield. Didn't really feel like he was.
I'm going to steal this. I'm going to steal this nickname. His nickname up in Albany is Castro Supernova, and he did go and he went Supernova in Jacksonville. He balled out, and if Albany fans are listening to our show today and were wondering at your quarterback situation or issue, you have no worries. Castronova will step in and win you games. If Faithful does come back on the roster for Albany, you have two damn good quarterbacks. And usually when you have two damn good quarterbacks, you have a solid roster. And Albany has a solid roster. That game was awesome, but we'll get to that later. Of course, one thing that we've got questions about this over the last couple of weeks about how trades happen in the NEL and how it's based. We get questions like, is it based on salary? Is it based on position by position? We get messages for that. We get questions about that. I'm just going to tell you the answer of it. It's all up to the ownership groups.
Correct.
And it's like, oh, we trade you quarterback, you give us quarterback. Not necessarily. It depends on the two, and it also depends on the player if he does want to go. So if that trade did happen between Jacksonville and Albany, it would have been a monumental shift in the landscape of the arena, and clearly could have put Jacksonville solidly in the top three, possibly top two, and in contention for the win it all. Because that's Faithful. That's he did that in 19. Well, of course, he was with Jonathan Bain as well. And that 19 squad was legit for Jacksonville too. So
Yes.
yeah, these type of trades are very rare to happen. This one did not happen. So if it does happen again, it'd be shocker, whatever. But usually you don't see these type of trades. A couple of trades already happened this season between San Antonio and Albany and Jacksonville and San Antonio, but they were just player for, I want to say complimentary picks because it's draft for complimentary other the positions that they may need. Trades happen in leagues trades happen in NAL, but they're not quite often like you see in the NBA or Major League Baseball. They're very rare in National Arena and in the indoor game period. But speaking of which, that's all the news that happened before the weekend. Some transactions. Let's get into that.
Let's do it.
Some of the transaction news. One of the key guys, Trayvon Short, used to play for the Carolina Cobras, was released from Carolina. Me and Zach knew right when he got released who will get picked up. He went back to Albany, which is not a shock. He signed with the Albany Empire and most likely will be in uniform this weekend when the Albany Empire travel to the Orlando Predators in Amway Arena. So people in Orlando, get your tickets now because it looks like it's filling up pretty fast, which is a good sign.
That's good.
Also, Jacksonville signs a quarterback, Damian May. He is a IFL veteran. He played in Green Bay for a couple of years. They signed him to fill up the role for the backup role for Jacksonville because Warren Smith, of course, wasn't dressed for the Jacksonville Sharks on Saturday. Still don't know reason why. We'll still get the information that comes to you. When we get that information, we'll send it out. But we do know that both Faithful and Warren Smith were not dressed for that game against Jacksonville. And, of course, a big injury, not really a big injury, for the landscape of the league, but a big injury for the Albany Empire as Magruder suffered an injury at the end of the Jacksonville Shark game. He's been placed on the 30-day IR for the team. And Albany is hoping he'd be back for the May 21st game against the Jacksonville Sharks.
Well, got some time at least. I mean, it's funny you say DL because I mean it kind of like a DL.
He is it. Yeah, he is a defensive lineman too. So that's why I look at the transaction. It says his position. Like, I read the wrong initials. I'm an IR.
But I mean, Magruder, you are losing an all NAL player for a month, so that is a bit of depth gone. Credit, you are gaining back at least in linebacking core an all NAL linebacker and Trayvon Short. So that's a nice signing to see. Someone that was trying to actually have USFL aspirations, and I don't know. Honestly, I'm assuming from what I could tell, wasn't a good fit or couldn't fit in with Carolina. So why not bring him right back into the fray if you have that chance? It's nice to see that familiarity back, and really the Empire could use it. I didn't like this past week when we get into it. I'll be frank, defensively, still one or too many lapses, especially later in the game. But whatever they can get to help stabilize them on that side of the ball, the better, because obviously that's the part that we're most concerned about going forward. So I'll take what I can. I'm up for people that are familiar with the system, and he gets an opportunity to play. He'll probably be thrusted in pretty soon. So that's great to see.
Also, I just want to correct myself. Bruder is a defensive back, not a defensive line. I want to correct myself. So my apologies to the Albany fans. Just like, you don't even know his position.
Dude had some bruising hits last year out there in the secondary, man. That was where he's making the highlights. Guy had some hits. I'll tell you. And he was also he was one of the guys that signed on coming up from that up to that tryout. Came on, all NAL player off of that. Signed off the street, makes his impact right away.
And he showed out in the championship game last year.
Exactly.
And when you make a name yourself in the big time games, you'll come back or you'll get picked up by somebody else.
Right.
So
yeah, at least it's 30 days. That's what's nice. Of course, there's plenty of time. Obviously, the NAL season, without the way Albany's going, they're still a projected playoff contender anyway. So might as well, get him ready for the stretch run because they'll be in that top four. That's all you gotta get. Just get the top four.
And it's not a lot of people. I've already seen a couple of fan bases scream this about how they're starting. It's a bad way to start. There's 6 teams in the league. top 4 make the playoffs. You can have a bad start in the season and still manage your way to navigate yourself to that 4 seed. So
That's right.
For Shark fans, the San Antonio fans, 0-2, long season. San Antonio has 10 more games. Jacksonville has 12 more games. So Jacksonville's schedule gets easier in the second half of the season. They have a gauntlet to start the first 6. So it's going to be intriguing. We really haven't gotten to what you want to say separation Saturday yet between the top and the bottom. But when we get to the final 4 weeks of the season, the playoff push, that's when you're going to see teams like Jacksonville, Orlando, San Antonio, possibly maybe in Albany compete for those final 2 positions or 3 positions, or Columbus, whoever. I think, even though you want to say Albany is the fans up there are disappointed about the opening game loss and they think they're better than Carolina. I think Carolina's legit, and they proved it again this week. But when I see fans complain about postseason already, we're week 2, like still got 12 weeks to go.
But we have so much time. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, that's even considering that, for Sharks and Cobras fans, you have all 12 weeks of action straight through. There's no buys or anything.
No.
I mean, if we're talking like crying out loud, at least Gunslingers fans, I feel a little sympathy for you because you have to wait 3 weeks to even get to hit the field again. So
then they go 10 straight.
Exactly. So you have a 3 week, you have essentially a month off, and then you're like football constantly 10 weeks in a row, somewhere, mostly a road trip to start out of that break. But then you get like June through the end of the regular season to go back to Freeman Coliseum, which, by then keep on promoting it, hopefully get those crowds back to where they were, where they were at least similar to what they were doing this past weekend.
And there might be some more news coming out of San Antonio here in a couple of weeks that we'll give it to you fans when something does break down. But I think San Antonio found something this weekend. And for the San Antonio fans, I think you'll like this show because, yes, we know. We understand. We haven't been really giving you a lot of love. Be prepared. You're going to get some. But we're not going to go to you first. Let's go up to get the breakdowns of this past week in the National Marine League. 3 games are in session. This one in Greensboro, where the 1-0 Orlando Predators travel to take on the 1-0 Carolina Cobras in a matchup that was almost predicted by us, correct? We did predict these games. Actually, we both got the Jacksonville Sharks game wrong.
Right.
But we got
we did get that wrong.
Yeah. But if you look at this game against Carolina and Orlando, we talked about last week how Orlando had to see was their defense legit enough to slow down the offense of Carolina. That first half, no. But when you get down 21 points, it does hurt you.
Right. I mean, you gotta here's the thing. They started out pretty strong for about a quarter and a half. When you hold any team for almost the majority of the first half to 7 points in arena, that sounds pretty good. Problem is, you got to actually put points on the board when you're doing that, so you can relieve some of that pressure or provide a little more mustard on maybe say a blitz or two, when you're given the chance. That didn't happen. There's just a lot of inconsistency with the Predators offense right now. That defense can only hold the floodgates so long, and Carolina's got plenty that you can work with. I mean, when you're talking, and I got this again as I'm learning this more with the Ironman on who's like specializing, who's not. Like Ings and Myers are both playing 2 ways, mind you. So they're dominating on both sides of the ball right now, and they can freely roam, as you will. So these guys are eventually going to make you suffer, is what happens there.
Of course.
There's not many sacrifices in the specialist department because these guys are on the field the entire damn time.
Yeah. And you don't want to leave out a Lance Evans or a James Summers on top of that. That's bolstering that offensive core when they're on the field too. So they have enough people that they can throw in their offense where they might have a possession or two that they either struggle, couldn't get a sustainable drive, maybe turnover downs, but you're not going to keep that offense at bay all game long. You're going to have to answer them score by score. And Orlando just didn't have that ability this time around. But I'm looking at the stats right now. If you have a quarterback that's throwing 3 touchdowns, and he also, he also did run a couple in too as well. It's just, and you have receivers, DJ Myers, James Summers, Lance Evans, Kendrick Ings, and you just look at the roster and go, they have guys there that we look at Orlando and go, can they match Carolina? Yes, they can go with, Brandon Fuentes or Lonnie Outlaw, but you go 4 or 5 players deep, and that's when you see the separation between the two teams. It's I'm looking right here, right? And also you got your defense specialist, you got Nishan Robinson. Like, come on. I think was it Trayvon Young? I think the other Trevante Long, I think his name is. Like,
yes.
Like Carolina, again, this week proved to me again what we expected they will be this whole offseason. And unfortunately, Orlando, I still think they're trying to find themselves. And your next 2 teams you play, or 3 teams you play, I feel bad. With Albany, Carolina, and then I think Columbus after that. It's a hard road there trying to correct some mistakes. But
they got a lot to clean up. And I'll tell you one thing that I need to, obviously in arena, quarterback play is as important as it ever can be in football. I'm personally, I still think Rakeem Cato is your guy, as we saw in this contest. But if Rakeem, if you're listening, here's my advice, and this is just me watching you play, or for those that are watching, here's what I would say needs to happen. Slow the game down a little bit for you, because there is way too many times. And look, bailing out of the pocket, it's a part of the QB process. If you don't have the integrity stay up fully, you got to bail out. You got to at least buy some time for yourself. I get it, but there were way too many times where it was easy to say, you get the snap off, and as soon as you got that 3-step or so drop back, instantly was trying to leave the pocket. And I'm telling you right now, in the NAL in particular, it's traditional style arena. You want to, if you can, primarily stay in that pocket if you're able to. You want to set your feet. You want to be able to throw it accurately and read those routes and time them correctly from there. Bailing out is only if it's absolutely necessary. If you are starting to feel pressure, felt one too many times Cato does do that. And then, Connor Kagi, when he's been in, it seems like he doesn't read the field well, or at least to me, he doesn't. So Cato's your person to go with. It's just, I feel like we are not seeing as consistent QB play out of Orlando for what the core receiving core has on the table. We know Darren Clark and Lonnie Outlaw can play and can ball, but you got to give these guys opportunities. Lonnie Outlaw shouldn't be finishing with 15 yards passing on the night. That's insane to think. After last year, what he did with Mason, now credit Mason, completely different level, but still, Lonnie's a big guy. You just got to throw it up to him in at least somewhat of his radius, and he should be able to come down with that bad boy.
Well, the same issues from last week 1 crept again on Orlando in week 2. It just feels like what you just mentioned about Cato, just height, run. That may work in other leagues, but in the arena game, you got to sit in that pocket.
Slow it down, man.
But I'm looking at their stats right now, and Lonnie Outlaw, you're talking about a receiver that was averaging almost 60 yards a game last year with, of course, it was Mason Espinoza, but still 60 yards a game. And that's with Antoine Grant, Deloach, and Desmond Reese on the same roster last year.
Right.
But I look like you could say that the receiving core, like, it was just every guy got the chance to get the rock, but you're not going to win in games with receivers having 18 yards, 15 yards, and 28 yards in this game. You're not. That's not arena football numbers. That might win you game in another league, but not in the arena. But one thing you can, if you look on that team, like usually in an arena game, the quarterback is, you ride and die with your quarterback. It's not like an outdoor game where you can have a game manager and win the Super Bowl because your whole team, either defense or special teams, or is there something on your offense that, like a Derrick Henry, for example, can lead you to the championship. In the arena game, you ride and die with your quarterback. And the thing about last week is Jonathan Bain was almost perfect. Like, he was in the pocket. He can have picnics. He can have DoorDash delivered to him there while the game's being played. Carolina's that's Bojangles territory, so I guarantee you can get some Bojangles.
What do you think? What do you think his DoorDash order is while he's
probably Bojangles? Not a sponsor.
Yeah,
not a sponsor. But yeah, Bain like sat in the pocket, like he read the defense, and when you have a quarterback like Bain who's been through the trials and tribulations of the arena game, you can tell that Orlando is not just a couple steps behind. They might be a half a mile behind because you have two quarterbacks in Orlando that have nowhere near their experience as Bain, that are learning the new Ironman game and the arena game at the same time. But you look at their roster in Orlando and you go, yes, they're 1-1, but they don't look like a team that won a game, even though they won week 1 in San Antonio. What really got me about this game is just, honestly, the constant, get first downs. Like Orlando was going four and out, like 3 straight possessions. You give you get Carolina or anybody another possession in the arena game. By the time you score a touchdown, you'd be down by 3 scores.
Well, it's bad, but some of those are backbreaking too, because like you had a few of them in the first half that were in deep Carolina territory, and they just shut them out. They just flat out said no.
Yeah,
and I mean that alone is killer. You arena is notorious for possession game, and the possession economy is what I call it. You cannot lose possessions in this game. Like, they are more crucial than any other version of football. You have to be able to convert, or you can't waste the time that you have spending going down the field. I mean, and again, with the defense holding at least upwards until the back half of the second quarter, you have them at 7-0. You got to take advantage of that. Like, you can't have stops deep like that if your defense is playing up to snuff like that. So plus with the Iron Man, you're just tiring yourself out even more. I mean, sure, we can shuffle these guys in and out, but some of these people play and they stay in. We've noticed that rosters, there are those guys that it's like, you're my guy, you ain't coming out. You know, you are going to tire some people out eventually. Is how it works.
And we don't know. It's still way early in the season. We still don't know what Orlando is. They have a couple individuals that will be reactivated on their roster in the coming weeks that will bolster their roster. These individuals are currently either teaching somewhere in Orlando or are teaching somewhere around the United States. They will be back on the roster in a few weeks, and that will bolster their chances of being a more competitive team down the road. But me and Zach also said this off screen, that a pivotal game for Orlando may be the rematch against the Gunslingers here in a couple of weeks. Is this a determination of who can be don't want to say it, basement dweller of the league, and the team that will be competing for that 4 seed for the remainder of the season? It could be maybe too prematurely, but that will be a couple weeks down the road, and we'll start to see the identities of these teams. Speaking of San Antonio, let's go to the Freeman Coliseum in San Antonio, Texas. First off, I just want to say this. San Antonio fans, you got my respect. That was a hard-fought game, ugly game. I think at one point there was like 8 straight penalties that were flags thrown. That really kills the momentum of the game, and that will get sorted out. But just FYI, last Saturday I was in Jacksonville for the Sharks game, and me and Chris Siegfried were in the sideline watching the game on the phone. Jacksonville game ended after its overtime 5 minutes before the ending of Columbus and San Antonio. We went to overtime. We started at 7. You guys started at 8, and you guys finished 5 minutes after us. We ended. A little slow, but from watching the game again, this is just me taking my notes and watching the game again, I realized that all the penalties and all the issues were not like back. You know how people say, oh, it was a lot of penalties in the first half, second half. It was spread out. And just want to say from my sources, these refs that were in San Antonio were not NAL refs. They are from the AAL, ref in the game. Now they're part of the NAL, but they were refs of the AAL last year. So they're also going through a learning curve, just like the two teams are.
Yeah. Hey, we actually had a talk on the side with some folks about part of it being the return game, discussion on when's the ball out if you're going to drop it on the carpet. Here's the deal. Hits that sidewall. It's not a bounds marker if it hits the side. So some of those returns in that game, some of us were noticing weren't exactly returns in the rule set. So yeah, there's learning curves to that, unfortunately. I mean, we're already doing it with Iron Man. We did it with week 1. Week 2, hey, week 2 seemed like it was better. I'll give it that. Less penalties on substitutions. That was nice. But that needs to be cleaned up. That game alone, it was
ugly for both teams.
Well, it was ugly just because you can't. I mean, look, penalties are part of the game, but you can't tell me that that consistently each drive. I'm going to see a yellow rag hit the turf, and I'm going, what in the heck are we stopping the game for again? So that's got to be cleaned up. Now, if they're AAL refs, gotta get up to speed. You got some time now because you're in the area. Get the rules down. They aren't playing until June in the Freeman Coliseum again, so you have a moment to get yourself ready. Really, that and the folks over at the Gunslingers have time to readjust for a new home game. Because for those that didn't hear, remember the folks at John Wayne Service Company gave away essentially all the seats in the stadium, and the crowd much better than week 1, obviously for reasons. I hope to see a lot of those people, or at least a chunk of them, come back in June. Maybe they like the experience. It was a 1-point game, even with the penalties. Pretty competitive for a few reasons, of course. One of them being the new quarterback.
Well, new quarterback, Robert Kent, who is a 3-time champion, CIF and AAL last year, really came in and settled down the San Antonio offense. I was really impressed how last week San Antonio looked like they were always trying to play hurry up without getting their fundamentals correct. Robert Kent came in this week and really slow down the team, and it was competitive from the start to the finish of this game. There wasn't who had a decisive advantage in this game. It was always a strikeable game from both teams. San Antonio get a lead, they'll lose a lead, vice versa. But the guy that I think we need to start giving praise to on the show here from San Antonio is Khalid Rashad, number 5 specialist. The guy showed out again in San Antonio. We, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, just side note, we knew about him in week 1, but we didn't know who he was because on the website it just said his name and not his number. And on the announcers in the game never really said the guy's name. They also said number 5, and we're like, who? Help us. So we know who it is. I'm not bashing him, but still we know who it is. But there's some guys I just want to give a shout out to in this game was Rashad. Dude is legit. He's one, I think, the best specialist in the game, returner. The guy, every time he touches the ball, he's on the opponent's 5-yard line where he's dancing in the end zone. That's what it seems like over the last 2 weeks. Also, Marcellus Brooks showed out. Nico Creamer, another guy who was pretty solid. Of course, I think one of the most underrated defensive ends in the league. I think he played a little bit of fullback. I almost said it's Cody Brooks. who is going to be a future guest next week on the Inside the Walls podcast. So we're showing you more love San Antonio next week for Turf Talk on next Thursday. There's some guys on this roster now that I've had 2 weeks to look at now and go, I see the potential of this team. And coming up Friday, ladies and gentlemen, the final walkthrough, will give you my power rankings. You might be surprised in the power rankings for you fans of San Antonio. Just giving you a little teaser. A couple of you San Antonio fans already know, but there's others that I will tease. But guys that just impressed me, of course, Kent comes in there, sells down the offense, and the offense looked more explosive, more organized. Yes, we have issues that we're going to talk about a little later about the ending of the game. But overall, just based on what I've seen in the last 2 weeks, I'm making this statement, and it may piss off some people about this. San Antonio's not the worst team in the league, and the team they lost to got lucky in week 1.
Well, I mean,
that's just based on the rosters right now, because San Antonio, in my opinion, day and night comparison from week 1.
Well,
more organized, better team. And I think, honestly, Zach, did they play up to their competition when Columbus came in, or did Columbus have a off night?
I mean, tough to say. Look, I'll be honest. Like, I think some of the game flow definitely affected how this was played. You know, not certain rules not being followed correctly, the amount of flags, stop and start type of momentum here. So I bet for that, and the fact that it was a much more crowded Freeman Coliseum, that probably played into the hands of the Gunslingers a bit more. Kent definitely, and no offense to Javin Kilgo, because he also had a decent night, at least at times, against the Predators week 1. But Kent definitely seemed to be a little more solidified. Obviously, he's a veteran in this sport. Definitely showed it on the evening. And, I'm liking that now that we have stats and that we have rosters that are being updated, I could follow along. Like, I've been like, week 1, I was like number 5, but I didn't want to talk about it because I'm like, I don't have the names. I wasn't able to put a name to face. But yes, Khalid Rashad definitely is a star in this league right now. Someone you're going to want to be following in each one of these games, because he's going to be Kent's number 1 target. At least if we're following trends of this week, guy's going to probably do it. Not to mention, top defender too, 4 tackles, 1 assist out of that deal, a pass defense as well. I mean, guy was all over the place and making the returns. Dude's a special player for the Gunslingers. That's the type of player you want to see in this league. Someone that helps you get the highlights for the NAL. So nice to see that. I'm looking forward to seeing him more as we go along down the line. Marcel Brooks, of course, Nico Kramer definitely had their moments too. Both of them are definitely going to be highlight players for the Gunslingers. But I think, you want to argue which one played up or played down. I'm gonna say that the Gunslingers played up, probably. I think I was actually kind of impressed. I mean, they were 1 2-point conversion away from putting the pressure back on Columbus and having them have to go drive down the field, kick a field goal, mind you, which has not been easy this year from what we can see, or score. Now, credit, they could have scored. Got Forston, Reese, the whole 9 yard. They have options. We know that. But I'm saying they were a 2-point conversion away, or a stop, or possibly a clock stoppage based on what we saw online, for maybe they could have punched this thing in for a touchdown. I mean, they had the ball at the end. That's the thing that we got to remember. They were the ones that were in Columbus territory, and the clock just ran out. They just didn't have any time to reestablish themselves for one more play.
I have a question for you. This is about Columbus. Is the hangover of Mason not being on the roster affecting him right now with Darren Daniel?
Maybe. I don't know, because Darren's had time now. He looked rattled at times, a little discombobulated. I mean, I know he's a veteran by sorts in this game. He's been in with the Columbus Lions before. I know it's been a few years, but still. But he did look a little disjointed out there. I think a lot of it did play into just some of the rules not being followed correctly from what we were told, as well as just the flags. Like I said, the game was so weird with how the flow was. Like at one point it was like I'm watching it after the fact after I see of course, Albany and Jacksonville, and then what I saw Columbus with Carolina and Orlando. And, the the timing of the game actually was pretty on par with a normal game. It's
Mhm.
just the amount of times you saw the yellow flag hit the turf, you thought the thing was going slower, or it didn't seem like it was that fast.
Yeah.
But
And
I mean, even clock operator stuff. I know people pointed that out too. Some of the first half ones were a little slow on the punch, to
Mhm.
stop the clock. So that might have helped. But I don't know. I think I want to see another week here after the bye, of course, for the Lions to give some time. I think that's kind of my gist on this.
yeah, it's strange just because Darren Daniel, he's not putting up Mason numbers, but the guy still had 6 touchdowns.
What was his legs?
Rushing and passing.
He's a little more mobile. That's what's helping him out.
Excuse me, 5 touchdowns, but still.
Take what I see with Rakeem Cato, but
Mhm.
he's a little more patient and wants to throw before running.
That's based on his experience because he's been.
Whereas Cato wants to run before he throws.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense to you out there, he looks for the pass before he then bails. Whereas Cato looks to bail out of the pocket so he can either help himself pass or try and run as fast as possible. Which, again, if you have that Jack linebacker sitting there, as soon as you get out of the pocket, the Jack can kind of just coast out with you.
Yeah, because he's technically spying you the whole time.
Exactly.
Time,
so I'm just, it's a little harder to do it with that.
If you just look off of stats from Columbus is just doing Columbus things, honestly. Fortson's doing Fortson stuff.
Execution. It's execution.
There's nothing that
pops
out that go, man, this is bad, this is good. It's the Columbus way. For some odd reason, this is why I respect Gibson for Columbus from day one in this league. No matter what you throw at him, or no matter what it's on his roster, you're going to have to beat him and play clean. Usually, Columbus doesn't shoot themselves in the foot. They're a very disciplined team. But this game was just ugly for both. And I felt that's why I gave you the question. Did San Antonio play up to Columbus, or did Columbus have a down game? Because I didn't expect – when I watched that game, the replay, I'm watching like this doesn't look like a Jason Gibson team.
Yeah.
Because of how it was just, struggling to get through. And I was like, is this San Antonio smacking Columbus in the face? Like, we may be the expansion team, but we're not going to be a pushover. Or was it just Columbus just going through walking through? And we've had conversation with Columbus fans. They believe the second opinion, that they just walk through it and didn't, play up to their capability.
Perhaps
that's because they're fans. they always side with their team.
Well, I mean, Columbus is a standard of, they're one of the winning teams in the NAL. They're expected to be in the playoffs. Yeah. They're expected to be in that conversation each year. I'm still holding that the Gunslingers played up. I mean, keep in mind the Gunslingers held the lead usually by a possession for the majority of this contest.
Yeah.
Really it was more in the fourth quarter. They just let one possession slip. That's what happens. When games like this, if you can't break away, if you can't get a possession stop with the lead, you generally just have to be answering 1-to-1 ratio. So what happened was add no kicking to little kicking that San Antonio did. Eventually the possession game fell on them, and that's all she wrote.
Also, one player that stood out to me for Columbus, if we did stars for teams, like who stood out to you the most on each team, like Rashad for San Antonio, especially for week 1 and 2.
Correct.
But the guy that we never gave love to from Albany the last 2 weeks is Townsend. The boy's been everywhere. He's just like Rashad.
You mean Columbus, but yes.
Yeah. Excuse me. When I said San Antonio, my bad.
You said Albany.
Albany?
And I said,
I'm always thinking that.
And I'm burying myself because I even said it where people are like, "What the heck, man? You were gonna correct him, and then you said it like the most backwoods way you could have, the most non-regional friendly way you could have said it."
Hey, it's natural, man. It's natural.
But dude, Townsend, I'll tell you, dude had a solid night. 5 catches, 51 yards, a TD. Obviously he was all over the place with 3 tackles himself. Yeah. Him and Forston are really both forces, are Iron Men on their own right that are making impacts each week so far. I mean, Forston alone had a slight one-up on Townsend with 2 TDs and 7 more yards.
Yeah.
2 less catches, but hey, impact all over the place.
One thing that really got me was Desmond Reese wasn't really in the game plan a lot. And
Yeah.
he's a weapon.
Mm.
And maybe it's just like it depends on how the coaching strategy is. I don't know what Gibson had a game plan, but I look at his stats. I'm like, that's not Desmond Reese numbers. I'm not used to seeing those type of numbers from Desmond Reese. And of course, it's that question: is the hangover from Mason still there? But I'm looking at Darren Daniels' numbers overall last 2 weeks. It's not bad. It looks like he's still getting his feel into the game, and it's like how Patriot fans are. We trust Bill Belichick. Columbus fans trust Jason Gibson. He'll get the ship riding in the right direction. But overall, I was very impressed by San Antonio in this game. Losing by 1 to a Columbus team that basically is a prominent title contender every single year in this league. It gave me a point of like, this organization is going in the right direction and it's going to help improve that team. They have 2 weeks to get ready for their next opponent. I think they're at Carolina, I want to say, is their next opponent.
Yes,
So
the next opponent. That's right. They go to Snake Pit.
That's a big test for them, man.
It is.
And
it is.
2 weeks to prepare. Robert Kent as your QB, or was it Kilgo? I think it's Javin Kildo.
Mhm.
San Antonio fan 0-2. Yeah, you're 0-2, but still massively different. The San Antonio team this past Saturday would beat the San Antonio team from week 1. That's how much improvement they had.
No, I think it would. And they're even getting better here. Like they did this last week. Here. I mean, they have another kick. They have a new kicker. They're going to be getting in shape here. Sebastian Cuenca. So he'll be getting some time, of course, these next 2 weeks to get adjusted. I mean, that's a part I think really you'll get, like I said, you'll get how the game played out. They did a lot of 2-point conversions. I think if you had a solid kicking game, things might just change.
Yeah.
The ball isn't like that's the thing. You have to have, those extra points do matter in this long. I mean, they lost by one or two 2-point conversions or a kick, and this could be overtime or a complete flip. They get their first win, and we get our first major upset of the season.
And also, there was an intriguing moment to end that game. Both sides kind of bantered on social media about who was in the right, who's in the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
With it was like 10.6 seconds left on the clock. Columbus blitzed, broke through the line, got to Robert Kent, and he scrambled to a point where he didn't get out of the box, threw it, got flagged for intentional grounding, and the clocks stay the same. Someone asked me, did San Antonio call a timeout? No, they didn't. They didn't have timeouts. What's that rule? You don't have timeouts to stop the runoff. 10 seconds runoff happens. Then you had 0.6 seconds left on the clock. They would have ran that. I think it was like a little 8-yard post route to I forgot who it was. I want to say it was Brooks, and that would end the game. And so San Antonio fans is like, well, we should have that. It should have another play. There's 0.6 seconds on the clock. Technically, no, because there should have been a 10-second runoff 2 plays before. That didn't happen because of the quarterback intentional grounding. That's right. If the rules were played by the rules. But then San Antonio did get another shot. And again, they said the clock went too fast. It's like, oh, there's 0.6 seconds on the clock. Well, and
there was no winning. It was an ugly night for officiating. I mean, I'll beat into a dead horse here. Really can't sugarcoat it. It was ugly. Like that's the thing. That's going to be cleaned up. I suspect. Just our talks with folks in the league, or especially imagine when the commissioner, you see him going there week 1, and the league wants the Gunslingers to be that westward-esque expansion, moving into a different territory, not just be an East Coast league. They want this to work, so they want to make sure they have the best product available out there and that they're representing themselves right. Some growing pains the first 2 weeks is really the story you're getting away with.
Expansion teams go through that. You see in other football leagues, expansion teams struggle. Don't always look at the Las Vegas Golden Knights and in the NHL thinking an expansion team can make it to the Stanley Cup Finals the first year.
Right.
That very rare that happens.
It's really rare.
But what really
rare.
The performance on the field intrigued me. It got my attention. But also what's a big win for San Antonio was John Wayne coming in there and getting the chance to get more fans in the stands. That was pretty cool for a big-time sponsor to do that. Apparently, John Wayne is a big-time company in the San Antonio region, so it's good that a company like that is buying into San Antonio. Eventually, the fans will buy in too. This is where, for San Antonio fans, before we go to our last game, build on that. Yeah, 0-2, but you have promise, and you showed you went neck to neck with a team that went to the championship game last year. And you have 2 weeks to get prepared for a Cobra team who is basically the best team in the league based on standings right now. So let's go to another 1-point game. I was at this game.
Yeah.
Home opener of the Jacksonville Sharks, the Albany Empire, 0-1, taking on the 0-1 Jacksonville Sharks. One of these teams will start 0-2 for the first time in their franchise histories.
Man.
Jacksonville did one time start 1-4, but they also opened that season 1-1. That was in the AFL days. Never 0-2. It's the first time that Jacksonville Sharks started 0-2. The Jacksonville Sharks lost in overtime to the Albany Empire 61-60 in a very unique game. Wasn't like San Antonio. Really wasn't not a lot of slowdowns, but there were a lot of good plays, some great catches. There was a catch in that game I was expecting to see in the ESPN Top 10. It was a deep pass to Devin Wilson. He caught it on his shoulder. And
yes.
I'm like, that was an awesome catch.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I was like, I hope it gets the top 10, but no, it didn't.
Well, that one this game really felt like there were like haymakers being thrown all
both sides,
over the place. And I like the build up. Obviously, the tension with the rescinded trade on on the inner circles of the league definitely was looming over this one.
Of course.
Sam Castronova getting the start because of, well, reasons with that said rescinded trade. You have Malik Henry getting his second one, came off a really solid start, we felt, week one. And really, I mean, it just felt like it was like top of league, what you want to see in the NAL on the weekends type of play. Like these are two playoff teams. You know, it was the atmosphere, of course, in the Shark Tank being the way it is. Yep. You know, hostile, but in a good way, in an arena way. You know, something that's a challenge, but makes you thrilled watching it on TV. And there was never a moment of missed action. It was always close. There was no obvious who was going to take this thing by the end. You know, I went to overtime, but I mean, like, it felt like the game was in reach all 4 quarters for the most part. Maybe you could argue the end of the fourth with how Albany didn't really, per se, put Jacksonville away. But I digress. I mean, it's arena football, folks. Like, 2 possessions, as long as you have a good enough squad, you can flip the script in just a few seconds.
Yeah. And it was a unique game, but the star of the show was Sam Castronova. Like, 0.3 for 35. He had 5 passing touchdowns, and he had a rushing touchdown. The guy played out of his mind against Jacksonville and won the game for him. But there was also some plays in that game with the receivers, that talented receiving core at one point. I was texting a colleague of ours at the game, and I'm like, you had Dangerfield, Antoine Grant, and Darius Prince on the same field at the same time. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, if you're an arena football fan, you don't understand how lethal that lineup is.
It seems like overkill the way you read it off.
Because if you look at those 3 guys, they were in the top 5 receivers from last year in the league. And they're all on the same roster.
Yeah,
that's
well, you look at the stats too. You know, okay, so Grant and Prince, that makes sense. You know, they finished top 2. Grant being the specialist, 129 yards on his own, a TD. Prince, I mean, dude's going to get TDs. Dude's going to be up there in yards. You know, being third, you know, and this is just because Iron Man, and I'm just used to because of when I got into the sport. I know this guy being touted as DB, but Dwayne Hollis this game showed up and had his moments. He was third in receiving in this one. You know, him and Prince are the Iron Men on the defensive side as well. He showed up and he had some good catches. He had some good moments defensively as well.
He got the first play that Albany had on offense. He did a drag route right across the middle of the field, and no one covered him. And Sam found him through it, and he ran all the way, I think, to the 2-yard line to start the game. Next play was an easy touchdown. Yeah, Dwayne Hollis is secretly, you look at that game, especially in week 1, he did the same thing. Defenders are looking at Dwayne Hollis like, you're just DB, you're not a receiver. And he's, got a couple of touchdowns in his name already as receiving. Yeah, that's but I just mentioned that I mentioned Dangerfield, Grant, and Pierce being at the same time on the field at the same time. And Dangerfield only has 12 yards receiving and 2 catches. And you go, how's that possible? Because when I just mentioned that, you would have never thought Hollis was in the top 3.
Yes.
But it was. But also, this is not announced yet by the league. It might be announced when this podcast was released. But I think Darius Prince is going to be the Iron Man of the week. The guy, multiple touchdowns receiving, and he had a couple of picks too. That man was everywhere in the game. And one thing I loved about this game is that, like we mentioned earlier in the year, Jacksonville has the better Iron Man roster, and you can tell because that kept Jacksonville in the game, because you can't go haymaker after haymaker after haymaker against Albany with that roster. Jacksonville did, because they benefited from top performances by a player, I said earlier this year, from Jacksonville, that no one's like, oh, Jacksonville does have a receiving core. Rob Jones, like, he had 900 yards with the New York Streets. Yeah, I know a bash in New York Streets, but Rob Jones was the main guy in New York with Edgar Allan Poe. Now he's with Jacksonville. Devin Wilson, Solomon, McGee. Jacksonville has a loaded receiving core. One thing I wanted to get at Jacksonville is not really at the team itself. It's at Malik Henry. We know you have a rocket arm. We know that you can throw the ball deep. Throw it to the check down man a couple of times. You had a couple guys wide open. You had a couple plays I saw where my seats are. I saw Rob Jones come across the middle, wide open. Devin Wilson had 2 guys on, and Malik throws it deep when he could throw to Rob Jones, and Rob Jones got 20, 30 yards to like the 5-yard line. There was a couple plays that happened with Malik. I was like, dude, the check down. I know a lot of people get mad. Like one of my buddies who was sitting next to me goes, man, Malik Henry's looking like Rex Grossman, just throwing it deep.
God.
Throw it to the
no. Okay. I got Bears fan here, folks. If you turn in for the first time,
he's also a Gator fan, by the way. So
I mean,
he's
don't
getting
get me wrong,
University of Florida. Rex.
Don't get me wrong, Rex would chuck it up. I agree with you on that, but I don't know about that. I mean, at least the guy. I mean, at least there was only 1 pick. Henry would have had to throw in at least 3 for me to go, okay, maybe that's a Rex Grossman mentality a little bit.
But yeah, good point.
Touche. But to play into your talk with just chucking it. Yeah. I mean, just look at the receiving numbers, like at the long ball stats on the site. So Devin Wilson 40, Naquan Murray 23, Solomon 20, Jones 29 is all longs. That's some depth. 4 of your passes, those were all touchdowns, by the way. They're just chucks. He's just chucking it up out there. And I love highlights like that. But look, the good arena teams, they know too how to cut you. A death by 1,000 cuts is just as deadly as dropping a dime from 20 plus yards out on that turf.
And you know who was notorious at doing that last season?
I got one.
Go. Who do you think?
I mean, Espinoza was one of them.
Yeah, he did go deep with Grant and Outlaw, but he tore teams apart with that short 5-10 yard range. That was him. Grady up in Albany last year was I'm going to go for the juggler every time, but Mason was the one that nickel and dimed you down the field. And then when you kind of probably press coverage, that's when he hits you deep with Grant and Outlaw and Deloach and Reese. But yeah, like, again, this is Malik's second game in the arena game, but he also has experience in the indoor game. I would have just expected that, just throwing the cut downs, because there was a couple of routes throughout the game that they were wide open. Like Albany knew that they're going to throw deep. Like there was one possession, dude, and I really got mad at it and like, stop throwing to Devin Wilson. You have other receivers. He kept throwing deep balls to Devin Wilson in 4 plays, and then it was a turnover down. So I'm like, well, Dwayne Hollis knows what's happening. Darius Prince knows what's happening, and they just follow Wilson down in the end zone. But Wilson did find his way, like Wilson does, to get his numbers and continue, I think, the longest touchdown streak in Jacksonville Sharks history, I
So
don't
what,
know,
28 games?
28 games in a row that he's caught a touchdown pass. I think I may have to do some research on, but I think that's the current record in an NAL, 28 games in a row, and that's still very freaking impressive. But teams are going to find that. They're playing Carolina this week. Carolina's going to figure out. They're going to put either Naquan Murray on him, or they're going to put Joe Powell on him, and just say follow the streak route. That's the only route that Devin Williams been running with Malik Henry.
Yeah,
and there are some plays that I think the YouTube didn't show, or the camera didn't show, where he overthrew Wilson, and Wilson just like either is it show like what the heck, dude? Like there's people behind me that are wide open and just chucking it deep.
Well, correct. You can't go 13 for 30 against Carolina or anyone that's up there, or really against Albany, because I'll admit this is another contest that showed, as much as Prince and Hollis are playing solid Ironman, there's still leaks in that Albany defense. To be frank, and that's not going to go away. For some reason, that's a carryover from last year. Like even with the Empire winning the championship, that was like their weakness, was if you could keep up with them and scare them just a little bit, just go with the shots. And credit to Henry, he only completed 13 passes out of 30. Sure, that's not a great completion percentage whatsoever. He's chucking it up. But hey,
but what intrigued me, what was unique is that in the second half, it wasn't the Jacksonville Sharks offense. They kept doing the same offense throughout the whole entire game. It was just like, okay, we'll may do a little, not really a short route. We'll do like a medium route, but we'll still throw it deep. What changed the game was the first play in the second half, interception. Jacksonville gets the ball back and goes right down the field and score. And right then and there, that 2-possession, almost 3-possession game goes back to 1 possession. Then that whole third and fourth quarter, it was just jockeying for position, because Albany will go up by 14, Jackson will come tie, and then Albany could back up by 14, and Jackson will come tie. Jacksonville made some adjustments that I noticed from the first half. Castronova was just getting mobile like heck in the first half, and they couldn't get anywhere. So I could tell by Jacksonville's defense, they were not doing a lot of bull rushing like they were in the first half. They were trying to contain him, like making Castronova, he wanted to beat him, had to run up the middle to get either into the Jack or the Mac, who was ever there. But they made adjustments. And what I've noticed with the Jacksonville defense in the second half, they played a lot more press coverage on the receivers. In the first half, they played a lot of, prevent. And just adjustments that are unique. It helped slow down or shake up Albany's offense, because Jacksonville erased that 20-some point deficit and made it to overtime. What was one thing I always said about Jacksonville, they're a solid team. They're maybe a player away of being one of the better teams in the league, but they have the build. I looked at this game, and I think both me and you both agreed. The Ironman rule never really affected this game like it did possibly in San Antonio. The game ran smoother in Jacksonville. And I felt like that for both sides, both brands, I think that it benefited the game. And it was really a true arena football game. You get the flags that slowed the game, reviews, whatever, but there was no substitution penalties. There was nothing that really slowed down the game to a bitter stop. But it was a good flow. And it was an exciting game. 6,964 people were in attendance in Jacksonville for the game. Again, fans do leave early, which aggravates me. With 14-point deficit with 2 minutes left, still gets me.
Talk about that overtime. Besides just that,
the overtime. Like I have two. This is me as a Shark fan, ladies and gentlemen. You tie the game. You score that. Malik Henry runs it in for a touchdown to tie the game right at the point. If you would have gone for 2, you would have took the lead with 4 seconds left on the clock. The chances of something, kickers are not going to make kicks this day and age in the NHL right now.
Right.
So it would have been one Hail Mary for the win. I was really mad. So I was like, hey, I'd rather go for 2 and lose by going for 2 at the end of the game for what I like to either die by a sword or celebrate victory. And we didn't go for it, and we kicked the extra point. And I'm like, okay, I think we had a better shot at going for 2. And that's like, okay, we win the toss, defer it, and we get the ball second half, score a touchdown, go for 2. In the arena game, if you're the second team, you get the ball second, You score a touchdown, you go for 2 because the next possession is do or die. And I was like, okay, those are the 2 things. Like Jacksonville should go for 2, win this game. I don't want to go to overtime. Well, they kick the field goal, go to overtime. So okay, better go for 2 the second time around in the game.
Right.
Don't give Albany a chance to get the ball again. What do? They kick a field goal, and history happens, and we lose the game. So that was me, bigger than as a fan.
Well, what really deflated me, so that I love that we went to OT. 2 weeks in a row we get an overtime game.
Again.
You know, that was pretty cool. You know, an arena that's kind of, it doesn't always, it's really kind of rarish in arena.
Overtime is rare in arena.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was kind of, it's a bless in terms of fun, like getting an extra bit. It was fun. What really sucked for me watching just Jacksonville is like, it was poetic. You have Devin Wilson, Moss, Darius Prince to get the game tying, to get basically the response touchdown, only to watch Brandon Bear completely yank an extra point. Like, talk about deflating the sails in the worst way possible, you know. And look, that the ball we've talked looks like something's up with it. We don't know fully, but I mean, it's obviously that was not what I was expecting at the end. I'm like, at least that's going to be tied, you know. And sure enough, that was one of the worst extra point kicks I've seen all season so far. And it just came at the worst possible time. The field goal try from Roscoe on Albany's side to end regulation was a closer kick than that extra point. Just, if you didn't watch the game, just go back. I'm telling you, it was as anticlimactic of an ending as you can have. That's one of the most deflating ends to a home crowd I could have seen if I was there.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend. You're preaching to the choir. Like, I was like, okay, go for 2. And I saw Brandon Bear coming out. I'm like, what are you doing? Albany gets the ball next. They score, they win. Like, what the heck are you doing? Go for 2. And like, then Brandon Bear goes and says, you better make this dang kick. Like, I write, okay, let's just lose in double overtime. Better make this dang kick. Dunk.
Shink left.
And I was literally like this. I'm like, what? Like,
man.
I was like, okay, well, Jim, you got to get prepared to do your show. Try and be non-biased as possible. 0-2. 0-2.
Yeah, but look, for 0-2 though, like, they keep showing that they're not going away. Like, Jacksonville's right there. You know, it's just finish the game or find a way to get ahead and stay ahead. You know, I mean, week 1 alone, like, it felt like there were so many mistakes that the Sharks made as we talked that they could have walked out of Columbus with a victory. Here, honestly, they snuck an overtime. Like, even when we were us chatting during the contest, we're like, yeah, the fact Jacksonville get back into this, Albany just didn't close out, you know. So like, they were there at the end. But that's the thing, like, it's a built up roster. It has the talent. You just got to be able to finish. I mean, execution's got to be there. And next week, I mean, it's going to be a fun one. It's not going to be easy, but the Sharks, they're 0-2, but seriously, if you're coming into this league this week and you're like, the Cobras got this, I'm like, don't be so sure, man. Like, I mean, I think it's gonna be a fun game between essentially sister teams, is how I look at them.
That actually are kind of really,
in a way, yeah.
But speaking of the stream of the game and our lovely announcers in Jacksonville.
Oh yes.
If you were watching the stream, ladies and gentlemen, I did it again later the next day. The quarterback versus Albany is Sam Castronova. His name is not Castro. There was multiple times in the broadcast.
Nor to Casanova, by the way. I'm not going to let you leave without that.
There's literally one part, I forgot what part of the game. He goes, well, Castronova's throwing rocks out there. And I'm like, what? Are we talking about the quarterback, or are we talking about
Castro slinging it?
1980 Cuba. It was like, whoa, easy. But I didn't know what was going on because I was at the game and I'm looking at the chat. And I'm like, what's going on here? Then I go replay. I'm like, oh my God.
You know,
like,
Castro's the MVP of the NAL.
I'm like, oh, we got to work on the names here. Like, his nickname is Supernova for Castro Supernova. But Castro throwing rocks out there.
Look, all I did was I looked down once at that chat during the game and I went, oh wow. They were getting it from the Shark announcers because they were saying Castro.
They weren't saying Sam Castronova. They were just saying
Right.
Castro throwing
Right.
dimes. I'm
Well,
like,
I got that after the fact because like during the game, I'm watching 4 football games. So I'm watching
yeah.
all 3 NAL games, and I got the USFL Saturday night game up for my
Yeah.
other show that I do.
The only
And
reason why
so I don't have time to have all the audio in there. And later on, I go back and I'm like, oh man, no wonder that was a layup. That's like the Right You Are Donnie thing from
from
You
Orlando.
know, I'm waiting for that. Next week, I'm waiting to see that comes back.
Bring it back, tradition.
Bring it on back.
I'm not really bashing Jacksonville. It's just like, do you hear people saying, "Oh, Bray is having a great game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers"? His name's Brady. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, Castro is part of his last name. Castronova is his whole name. Get it right. Just saying.
Castro.
Like, he went after me earlier last year for completely whiffing his name on Twitter back in the day. I call him Samsonov. Yeah, nowhere near Castronova. So, but still, I corrected my mistakes. Can you do that too, Jacksonville? Name is Castronova. But then again, I don't think they'll have a chance to cover an Albany game again. Next time is in Albany, where that's our boy Gaz up there in the Albany Empire game, ending on May 21st.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are some good points this week in the NAL. Some funny points from a couple of games. The Castro thing was hilarious on the chat. I love the NAL community, the small things that make us go, we can make this a better place for our league. But overall, it's a good week of action. Next week, 2 games. We'll get that into the Friday final walkthrough episode of Inside the Walls. But again, this is Wednesday Rewind. People want to know what's the schedule. Wednesday Rewind is last week's game. Turf Talk tomorrow on YouTube is when we get interviews with coaches, players, ownership, and whatnot. This week's guest is Coach Rezanalo of the Carolina Cobras and quarterback Jonathan Bain for the Cobras as well for tomorrow's show. And on Friday, we'll break down week 3 action of the National Arena League. But we're going to switch it up a little bit. Remember one thing.
Oh, you know. Don't be a jack out of the box, ladies and gentlemen.